Elesis Sighard, the first character in the list, the leader of the Grand Chase, the character I've been playing for 4 years. In today's video, we're going to talk about Elesis. We're going to be talking about her 4 jobs, as well as give my overall thoughts on each one of them. This guide will be specifically focusing on gameplay and explaining the job's playstyle to see if one of them end up calling out to you the most, since all jobs in the game can be played and overall enjoyed. This isn't going to be an in-depth character build or endgame related build content, since this guide is more focusing on the overall aspect of players, even though we can talk about the endgame some other time perhaps. So that being said, if you enjoyed this guide and like to see more like this in the future, you're more than welcome to leave a like and subscribe, because I'm making Grand Chase content here in the channel, at least on a weekly basis. That being said, let's start from the beginning. Before meeting the Grand Chase, Elesis lived with her mom and younger brother, whose name was... Sorry, I think I went a little too far with this one. Knight is Elesis' starter job. This is a job I also like to call Ryu from Street Fighter. Everybody knows, everyone played with him at least once, and it's pretty simple to understand how he plays. Knight features a good mix between doing damage and mobility, being a solid option for those who like to play both aggressive as well as a little bit defensively here and there. Commands like Wind Wheel Slash helps you get closer to enemies and bosses while also recovering MP when faced with many enemies together. Evasive Strike being really useful because of its life-saving iframes before striking, making a really safe option to attack while evading, as well as charge your MP to cast a skill or two if you're able to do so, and Provocation, which enhance your taunt to provoke enemies and reduce their defense by 5%. As well as allow you to dodge, because it also has iframes. It's kinda hard to make it work, but when it does, it's glorious. Every time. When talking about her overall active skills, Knight has 7 skills per level. Her level 1 skills are often close range and not strong overall, but they can serve as a great evasive skill because of their long duration. I can even freeze frame enemies for a long time upon use. Her level 2 skills are a little more offensive, being able to bring Elesis close to the enemies while casting a huge attack forward, or a projectile like in Swordfire level 1, 2, 3. And for her level 3 skills, these are the big ones, quite literally. These are skills that are focused on dealing a huge amount of damage whatever is in front of her, being really useful against bosses as her main target, or enemies with bigger than usual hitboxes, also known as mini-bosses technically. And lastly, her 4th skill is Bravery, a skill that gives you hyper armor for 20 seconds while also enhancing your basic attack and commands, being able to create big waves of attacks while also increasing your attack by 10%. This is accumulated with being able to tank hits that would take a good chunk of health normally, and even becoming the Flash. Bravery is a solid skill to keep yourself alive in tough situations, being also a really good crowd control option as well, as her waves can push back enemies into the other side of the map, allowing you and your party to make a good use of their skills. Overall, Knight is a solid first star option for Elesis. Many of the flaws of the job revolve mostly on range and damage output, but other than that, the difficulty of the job is not that difficult, and due to her provocation skills, it can be a very flexible job to use in most areas in the game, including the endgame content. Knight is still a very solid and fun option to go with for those who like to go a little bit in between damage and survivability. Now before we move on to the other 3 jobs we're going to see here, I do need to make a little space to talk about Elesis' universal passives, which are passives that regardless of what job you play with, they will stick around and be used during the game at any moment. And these are quite a treat. First one is Hyper Armor, or Berserk for the Brazilian players. Despite the name being hyper, this command actually only gives Elesis a super armor the last 10 seconds and has a cooldown of 35. Despite not being what it said it is, this command can be a lifesaver, making you immune to most dangerous attacks in the game. Keyword: most. Then her infamous roll, which allows Elesis to roll to the other side of the enemy. Another one of Elesis' most important commands that this can be really useful in many situations, not only to dodge an attack, but also set you up for back attacks and can cause extra damage along the way. But then she has stuff like Magic Defense, which I don't know what's so magic about it. This allows you to block and reduce the damage of any incoming attack or projectiles coming your way, not only raising your defense by 75%, but also giving you a super armor if Elesis' HP is currently on Fatal. While not seen frequently by players except for those that misclick the X button, this can come in clutch even though it doesn't have a big window to use like Hyper Armor. On top of that, Elesis has Firebolt Slash, which allows her to slash projectiles while using her air attack. This might sound cool on paper, but just letting you know right now for the PvE users, this is half a lie. This command is only usable for PvP, and the main focus mostly against characters that can spam projectiles like Liar and Army. You can use this on a couple of enemies in Elia, as well as Super Berserker, which is another PvP exclusive passive. After getting hit by enough projectiles, Elesis activates Super Armor for 5 seconds and set everyone flying up, dealing damage upon hitting the floor. Very situational passive, and unless you care for PvP and you're facing many liars, you're not gonna see this one too much. For her alternative 4th skill, she has Magna Slash, a skill that lands 5 hits forward. Not only this fourth skill can be used on all jobs, but you can also change the direction by pressing left and right while it's happening. A skill that can come in handy in many situations and can even replace some like bravery depending on the content you're playing with. Alright, so now let's move on to the next job, Spearman. Now instead of a sword, decide to move on to a giant pointing stick. Spearman takes a different approach tonight. Now, her basic attacks are more frantic and faster, being able to hit multiple enemies doing her combos. One very important change on Elesis' mobility, as she can no longer run like she used to. This might look like a downgrade to some of you, but Spearman dash speed is beyond human. Seriously, just look at that speed. If we talk as a whole, Spearman has the fastest movement speed of the list, being able to get to point A to point B like you're bunny hopping in a Valve game. This is a very obscure reference. Not to mention that dash attack, with goddamn I love hitboxes. Yeah, for having a bit pointy stick, Elesis' range grows slightly bigger, allowing certain attacks to reach really far and even multiple people as well, which makes it extremely convenient for her skills. Force Strike throws her speed forward, causing a huge amount of damage forward. Compact Slash turns Elesis into a Beyblade, allowing multiple hits on both sides as she moves forward. Fire the Lance is a projectile that goes forward at a slow speed, but despite being slow, this attack can hit like a truck, being very powerful against big bosses and enemies with super armor, as if they move, they would just take a spear for a walk, causing a huge amount of damage on their way too. Lastly, the fourth skill, Spirit Lance, which works very similar to Fire the Lance, but instead of turning the spear into a projectile, you extend the hitbox of the spear horizontally times 10. Spearman 4th skill is extremely useful in any situation. It's quick, has a great range forward, and is a one-hit done skill. Additionally, it can even cause a burning effect at a random chance to one of the enemies hit by it, causing them to take damage every 2 or 3 seconds. Although despite being powerful, this is a one-hit skill, meaning that if you don't crit or get a back attack, you'll be so disappointed you might even hear a fart sound effect when you don't get it right. But despite all that, Spearman is a good job with powerful skills in a horizontal line specifically. Perfect for those who like to see big numbers on the screen. The one downside I can give to Spearman is that her combo attacks can feel unnatural and slow on some occasions. Make certain enemies to be able to react to you quicker than you can say, oh bloody hell, I'm gonna get hit. Instead, many Elesis mains like me like to keep Spearman as a reserved job and only use it for the skills specifically. If combo with a job that can recover MP quickly or with a good pet, it can cause Spearman to be a highly flexible job, allowing it to use anywhere and still do good regardless of the level. On its own though, Spearman might struggle a little bit in some areas, but at the end of the day, it can get the job done. Not a difficult job to learn either, but getting the hang of the combos can be a little bit tricky. With their great range, speed, and damage with the skills, it's a solid job to be used anywhere, as well as for the people who like to see good numbers, and mostly complain when they don't crit. Next up in the list is Swordmaster. You abandon your point and stick for a big sword, formerly known as Giant Sword in the game. Swordmaster at first glance might be a job that might show that it can be slow and powerful, and on a close look at it, you're not that far from right. But just because you're right doesn't mean you're correct. Like Swordmaster's basic combo can be slow and not very flexible, but her greatest asset doesn't come from her basic combo, but it comes from her air movement. Using her slow but manageable dash followed by her air attacks can make Swordmaster a really fun job to play with, especially with her up Z attack. Yes, this one swing is what makes her a fun job to play with, especially when there are many mobs around and you remember that the size of your weapon is the size of Jupiter. Being able to keep up the combos of jump up Z, fall up Z is really viable way to play with Swordmaster, especially when the combo can recover MP really quickly while also applying a decent amount of damage on the way through, which, very similar to Spearman, is convenient for her skills. Power Break is a fast cleave forward that can knock your opponents away. A skill so fast that you can spam it with ease and somehow get away with it. Blade Beam sends a huge beam forward while sending a smaller weakened one backwards. This skill is very similar to Knight's Sword Fire, and you could even consider this an upgrade version of it if you may. Being able to hit both forward and backwards can make this skill very useful on big bosses, as well as small bosses that tends to be everywhere and nowhere. Dragon Dive sends a beam angle upwards and then drops into a powerful slam on the floor. A skill that does not work against small enemies properly, but can perform great against bigger enemies, which is mostly what they're target for. And for her first skill, Chaotic Judgment. Elesis jump and slam the giant sword into the ground, casting the ground to erupt into a pillar of fire. Not only damaging enemies near it, but also creating medium-sized pillars to appear beneath enemies on the screen, causing damage over time. A skill that is good against multiple enemies and keeping crowd control in check, especially if you have all of them aligned together so that the other pillars can appear all in the same place, maximizing the damage of the skill. I forgot to mention, but she also has a plunge attack, which is so fast and powerful that she can even set herself on fire. But other than that, Swordmaster is a great job, and honestly one of the funniest ones to play with. I feel downside of Swordmaster are mostly preferential, since most people would prefer the other jobs over Swordmaster, and for good reasons. 1. Unlike the other jobs, Swordmaster is the slowest job of Elesis' list. The overall speed speed is manageable, but compared to the other jobs, it's like watching a video at 30 FPS when you can simply watch it at 60. 2. Swordmaster struggle against small bosses. Power Break and Blade's Beam are good skills against them, but Dragon Dive can whiff on some occasions. You either miss the beam upwards or you miss the drop, there's no in between. This, accompanied by the fourth skill being mostly focused on multiple enemies, can make your options for offensive limited, since some of your attacks will not benefit to the full potential, at least if you don't have the second fourth skill unlocked. Still, despite these inconveniences, Swordmaster is still a solid job to play. Easy to learn, strong specifically against multiple enemies and big bosses. She doesn't fall off from the other jobs that much, and if paired with the other jobs like Knight and Savior, they can do a pretty good job if they're able to constantly keep the MP in check. Wait, did I just mention Savior? Lastly but not least, Elesis' fourth job, Savior. Now you abandoned your big sword, formerly known as Giant Sword, and decided that one sword wasn't enough. So you added another one to the equation. Savior is what I like to call a fusion between the flexibility and mobility of Knight, with the slow yet powerful movement set of Sword Knight, including the hitbox that is the size of Jupiter. Many of the things that the other jobs have can be seen in Savior in some way. For instance, Savior up Z attack is slightly similar to Swordmaster up Z, the only difference here is that it can do it twice. The dash attack is very similar to Knight's normal dash attack. The plunge attack similar to Swordmaster, but it's slightly faster and doesn't put you really on fire. By pressing back twice while you're dashing, Savior step back, dash backwards, what do you call that? This allows you to avoid an attack coming your way. But considering how you're not invincible doing it, it's best to use to get behind enemies for back attacks like you would do with roll. This backstep doesn't have a cooldown either, so you're able to use this in any way you like, specifically if you want to flex your Savior mobility to others. As if mobility wise wasn't already good enough, her skills are the cherry on top of the cake. Or the skills the cake and the mobility is the cherry on top of... Look, I don't know, man. At this point I don't know what I'm saying. Round Crash makes Elesis swing both swords forward, slamming them in the ground. This skill works and has the same function of Power Break. Faded Circle creates a spinning flame wheel around Elesis and then throws it forward, dealing continuous damage. A skill that can be long, which means it can be useful to avoid damage more than properly dealing damage, and if you don't like to wait for the skill to be over, you can also press Z to finish the animation earlier. Chaos Savior makes Elesis turn into a Beyblade 2.0, spinning rapidly before throwing an energy wave downwards. This is Savior's best skill, as while spinning, it's possible to hit the enemy multiple hits both in front and behind Elesis, which is insanely busted against big bosses. Since you can move to the upper part of their hitboxes, it allows you to hit them from both sides. Lastly, her fourth skill, Annihilate. Elesis creates a wind wheel that follows the enemy for 15 seconds before leaving. Annihilate is fast and consistent. It's 15 seconds of free damage that can also have back attack bonus, even if you're not attacking the boss directly or an enemy on the field. However, the windmill is not perfect. If you use Annihilate in a moment where the boss has iframes, which is a thing, the windmill will just not spawn at all, causing you to waste 4 bars of MP just to see an animation of Elesis spinning. And oftentimes, if an enemy is in a state of iframes where the mob is considered invisible, the windmill would just fly away as if the job there was done. Something that I only experience a lot in Void Taint, but it can happen more often than you would believe me. Alright, thank you, Jonathan. I'll see you next Wednesday, you piece of shit. But even with that minor inconvenience, Savior is a great job. It's a job for the people that love to listen to the crit sound effect, mostly. Not exactly the fastest job, as it might as well be the second slowest job movement-wise, but very much like Swordmaster, it's not slow to the point where it's unplayable. It's good enough to get things done. With the skill arsenal and damage, Savior is an extremely flexible job to work with, being effective against all types of enemies, from big bosses like Voids to small bosses like Chaotic Witch, thanks to skills like Chaotic Savior, and even the fourth skill when it works. One problem with Savior can be the MP management. Basic combo recovers a decent amount, but it's not fast enough to be able to cause constant damage. But then again, it doesn't take too long to realize that down Z while in the air is a gift from the goddess. So overall, in my opinion, Savior is one of the best. Not hard to get the hang of it, and pretty good damage potential compared to the other jobs. The skills are definitely the highlight of it. Would you believe me if I said this was the worst Elesis job for 2 years? I don't think I would either. And there you have it. These are all of Elesis 4 jobs. I hope this guide was of help to understand each of the 4 jobs a little better, and hopefully I help you decide which one of these jobs suit you the most. If this video was of great help to you, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, because this helps me out a lot as we do Grand Chase content here in weekly basis, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And if you'd like to see more guides by me, feel free to check the videos to the right, since I do have other guides here that may be useful to you. But on that note, I'll leave the video here. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys have a good day today. Stay awesome, stay safe, have a great farm section today, and we see each other next time. Peace.